4. Aaron's Wheel. She was falling into darkness, and her very being became as one with the night. Her memories blurred, streaked across the canvas of infinity. Her soul was torn apart, but she could not voice her pain or anguish, for she was without substance. And then, out of the darkness, a light like the end of a tunnel hurtled towards her and ripped through her, dissembling her identity as it passed. For an instant, she felt a dichotomy, as though her spirit had been split between twins. And the moment was over. Finally, when she could take no more, random scatterings of energy were converted into mass, and she found herself within the circle. Only, it wasn't the same. The diffuse grey sunlight of the Welsh summer had gone, replaced by a hellish glow emanating from the baleful red orb that hung malignantly in the dark, crimson-streaked sky. In the dim illumination, it seemed to her that the contours of the valley were unchanged, but the trees which had filled it had squatted lower and sprouted canvas overhangs. And no longer was the valley a place of solitude, for at the very edge of the circle, their hands nervously clutching weapons directed at her, were a crowd of men. They wore tabards, apparently made from rough sacking and secured by thick leather belts around their waists. Their faces, yellow and stained and bearing all the signs of malnutrition, were clouded with fear and trepidation at the sight of this newcomer. There was a movement in the air beside her, and a hand clutched her arm tightly. "Of the circle," the doctor finished, somewhat lamely. He shook his head as if to determine that everything was still in place. "Oh dear, what an unpleasant way to travel. An unsustainable low-capacity system," he muttered to himself. "Come out of the circle, strangers." One of the men, looking in better health than the others and who had an intricate design woven in the shoulder of his garment, had stepped forward. He was obviously the leader of the men around the circle, and he emphasized his position of power by waving a loaded crossbow at them. "Are you all right, Ace? Everything as it should be?" the doctor asked. "Oh, fine," she replied. "Why go to all the effort of getting drunk to get a hangover, when I can feel this good just by wandering into Stonehenge?" "You're all right," the doctor grinned. "Come out of the circle, strangers," the man repeated his command. "I will not tell you a third time." The doctor supported Ace as they walked towards him, and made as if to doff his hat. When he realised that he had left it perched atop the stone, he offered his hand in greeting instead. "I'm the doctor, and this is my friend, Ace." "Hi." There was no response, and once they were out of the circle they were grabbed roughly. The leader took Ace by the shoulders. "Oi, watch it!" she shouted, struggling wildly. "Do you mind?" the doctor asked, as his arm was painfully yanked up behind his back. "Hold her still," the leader commanded, and Ace's cheeks were clamped between two heavily calloused hands. "Get off!" He pulled Ace's hair to one side and peered closely at her neck, bringing a flaming brand up to it so that he could see better. He gave a snort and let her go. "She's free of the mark," he said. "So's he." "Well, strangers, welcome to Tir Na Nog. Welcome to Dinorban. I am Captain Rees of the Guard. I apologise for my heavy-handedness, but there are unusual times, and naturally we fear contamination. Now, you'll come with me. I must take you to be judged by the Tuatha." "Judged?" asked the doctor quietly. "What have we done?" "You have come through the gateway," Rees answered, "and your fate is uncertain. Come with me." "Professor," Ace muttered angrily, "I don't like this. What did he mean by contamination?" To her, the word had unpleasant undertones. Her mind fled back to a handsome young sergeant in 1963 who had wanted to keep the outsiders out. "I don't know, Ace, but one thing's certain. They aren't going to let us back the way we came." He pointed back to the circle, where the men had formed into a double ring, facing both towards the centre of the circle and away from it. "I wonder what they're guarding it against." Rhys was becoming impatient and signalled for 2 men to start shepherding the Doctor and Ace along with him. With the stimulus of a sword against their backs, they acquiesced readily, and he led them through the tents towards the entrance of the valley. It was only now that the smell hit Ace's nostrils. "Oh, yuck! What's that?" She screwed up her face and pressed the back of her hand over her nose and mouth. "Whiffy!" she exclaimed. "No sewers," the Doctor told her. "Look around you. There must be a couple of 1,000 people here. That's a lot for one small valley. It's bound to create some smell." Ace coughed and felt the bile rising in her throat. "How can they stand it?" "The human being is one of the most adaptable organisms in the universe. That's one of the reasons why the species is so successful. Other species have to bend their environment to fit a preordained need. Humans just do it because they can." "So how can they stand it?" The Doctor shrugged. "They get used to it after a while. Gallifreyans developed a respiratory bypass system which could miss out the olfactory organs. Your method is simpler." They went on in silence. Ace looked closely around her. As they passed, faces, grime-streaked and gaunt, peered out from behind tent flaps, silently drawn aside. Each face was different, but they all bore a common look that haunted their hollow eyes. It was a look that she recognised, the look of the hunted, and it was a look which stirred strange feelings in her because of her experience as one of the hunters on the planet of the Cheetah People. But a closer examination revealed something more, something beyond them being mere quarry. The hunted lacked hope, but had a fierce air about them, for their predator was close on their heels. But these people, whilst they were indubitably fugitives, had a pathetically hopeful look, which suggested that they thought they had somewhere to run to. The people here weren't cornered prey. The ferret facing a dog could at least turn and fight to the death, even though it had no hope of surviving. These people had been given a ray of hope which they clung to tenaciously, even as it slipped through their fingers. The tents ended where the ground began to rise to the edges of the valleys, and Ace, her eyes becoming acclimatized to the dim light, could see that at regular points along the valley top were squat towers, silhouetted in black against the sky. Between these towers marched small patrols. Ace wondered, as the Doctor had, what they were guarding against. But now she turned her eyes to the front and saw where they were being taken. Across what had been the open end of the valley was an enormous wall built out of huge blocks of stone. Here and there on this vast edifice there twinkled points of firelight, framed by small rectangles of dim orange light. The pale red sun low in the west gave depth and shadow to the wall. In its centre was a large opening, a deep-set hole in the wall. Far into the wall and half shrouded in darkness was a mighty wooden door. The length of the tunnel which led to this door was such that Ace could only believe that the wall must be over 100 feet thick. "What is this place?" she asked the Doctor. "You heard Captain Rhys. This is Tir na Nog, which, unless I'm very much mistaken in my memory of your ancient mythologies, was the kingdom where the Celts retired to when they died." Ace looked around her at this stinking, muddy, hellish world of fairy and rejected the idea. "But Professor," she whispered, "that's just mythology. Where is this really? Where on earth are we? Have we gone back in time?" The Doctor raised an eyebrow at this. "Just mythology, is it, Ace? Again, if my memory serves me right, King Arthur was just a mythology." He became serious. "I don't know where we are exactly, Ace, but we are a long way from Earth. Look up at the stars." Ace did as she was told. The sky wasn't like Earth's, where, during the day, The glare of the sun drowned the distant and relatively dim stars. The low level of light from the red sun allowed the stars to shine through the haze. Ace had once stood on a street corner in Perivale, while her friends took drags on cigarettes, and peered upwards. The night sky was filled with an orange haze from the omnipresent street lamps, and looked not unlike the sky of Tir na Nog. "Recognise anything?" the doctor asked her. She had only ever been able to distinguish the Plough, Cassiopeia, and Orion's Belt, and so these were her only reference points. But she searched for them in vain. "It's all different," she said. "Exactly. We're a long way from anywhere, on the outskirts of a galaxy, I should say." "But which galaxy?" He shook his head. "Professor, look!" Ace whispered urgently. She pointed to a fire smouldering at the foot of the towering wall. It burnt around the base of a tall stone post, and on it were obviously human remains which twitched horribly. "Oh dear," said the doctor. "We seem to have stumbled upon a rather barbaric culture." "Get moving, you two," Captain Reese called, and Ace realised that she and the doctor had stopped moving at the sight of the burning. The captain followed their gazes and saw what they were looking at. Spare no sympathy for those creatures. They were witches. They deserved to die. "Nobody deserves to die, Captain Reese," the doctor said, his dark eyes burning from within their hooded sockets. "Try to ignore it, Ace." He turned to her and saw that her eyes were firmly shut and her fists clenched. He reached out a hand to her, but left it hovering just over her shoulder. "Ace?" Finally she looked at him. "What sort of a scumbag could do that?" she asked. "Burn somebody alive!" The doctor allowed his hand to settle on her and turned her round so that she fully faced him, so that she couldn't see the fire. "It's a different world, Ace," he told her gently. The sky, a simmering, angry red, was filled with dense clouds like clenched fists. From the tents, eyes bulged in their sockets from faces that were stretched and drawn from prolonged misery. The fortress of Denorban, its walls pocked intermittently by blazing coals and night-filled craters, loomed over them oppressively. "It isn't the same," he said. "They're human, aren't they?" Ace said angrily, her eyes ablaze. Whatever they were seeing now, it certainly wasn't the ramshackle tents and churned mud of Denorban. More likely, it was the flat erupting in petrol-inspired flames, and Venetia's accusing eyes clamped within the burgeoning scar tissue. The two guards moved forward and gave Ace a push to start her moving again. She turned and glared, but her feet carried her onwards, towards the tunnel through the wall. The entrance to the tunnel was 25 feet wide and twice as tall, but as the passage penetrated the wall, it grew narrower and lower, so that by the time the gate was reached, it was only half that size. On either side of the entrance, two staircases ran upwards to small doors set high in the wall. Captain Reese led them up the left-hand set of stairs. As he climbed, the doctor looked down on the mud. He gave Ace a nudge and drew her attention to it. She gazed blankly down, and then her open face registered acknowledgement. "Tire marks! I think I can guess your perfectly simple explanation now." The doctor merely nodded and carried on upwards. When they reached the door, Captain Reese signalled for it to be opened by slamming the butt of his crossbow against its solid oak 3 times. It swung open rapidly and shut as fast once they were through. A short passageway, lit by dimly flickering torches, led from the door into a vast hall, which Ace felt sure must have spanned the width of the entire wall. Long trestle tables stained with the fat and wine of 1,000 meals filled the hall, and in a deep pit at one end a bonfire burned fitfully, releasing a cloud of smoke particles. Over the years, the fire had coloured the rock of the hall a greasy black. Reese strode into the centre of the hall and filled his lungs to shout, Carrion! Carrion! Where are you, you damned fool of a grass snake? A wooden panel high up in the wall over the pit clattered open, and a small dark head poked out from behind it. Wisps of black hair fell untidily across the face and danced impatiently when the person spoke. "What do you want, Captain?" "Are the Tuatha still within the chamber?" "Yes, of course they are, Captain." His eyes settled on Ace and the doctor. "Ah, have we then some visitors? Well, bring them up, bring them up." Ace whispered to the doctor, "Love that lisp." "We all have our crosses to bear," he reproached her. The panel slammed back into place, and in the wall far beneath it a pivoted stone swung open, revealing a set of stairs. Reese beckoned to the doctor and Ace to follow, and tersely commanded the two guards to return to the circle. Once on the stairs, the stone entrance shut smoothly behind them. A feeling of panic briefly caught Ace's mind as, like a wild animal trapped, she found the stone walls closing in around her oppressively. She reached out an arm to the doctor for reassurance. "Professor?" "Yes, Ace?" The feeling passed. "It's nothing. Nothing." The doctor moved her so that she was in front of him, and they started up the spiralling ascent. Torches hung on the walls at regular intervals and filled the air with oily fumes that clung pervasively to everything. Shortly, they heard footsteps descending, and druidic robes, followed by the head of Carrion, came into view. Come along. We mustn't keep the Tuatha waiting," he told them. And slipping nimbly round the stairs axis, he dropped onto the step behind the doctor and gave him a push. "All things come to those who wait," the doctor advised him. "Just watch who you're pushing, rat-face," Ace contributed belligerently. Taken aback, Carrion blinked, and then asked, "And who exactly am I pushing, Captain Reef?" "This is the doctor, and I'm his friend Ace," she finished. "Pleased to meet you," the doctor said. "You're some sort of priest, I take it." "Some sort of priest," Carrion spluttered. "I am not just some sort of priest." He raised himself to his full 5 feet 2 inches. "I am the highest-ranking druid in Tir Na Nog." He sagged and muttered to himself, "Much good that it does me. I am the land's first consort, reduced to running errands for the Tuatha De Danann." For a moment he contemplated the wall as if it was some terribly appealing but sad creature, and then he slapped his forehead. "What are you letting me do, Reese? Come along, no time to be maudlin." They waited impatiently. It was a magnificent chair, carved from the same rock as the walls of the chamber around it. Twisting and writhing about its surface was a multitude of creatures. At one time they had been further ornamented by gold serpents which coiled round the legs of the menagerie, but now, of course, all gold was gone from the council chamber. Driffid, leader of the Tuatha De Danann, ruling elite of Tir Na Nog, sat in the highly ornate chair and gazed levelly at General Nuada on the far side of the circular, thick wooden table. Nuada, the fingers of one hand silently drumming on the oak wood, listened intently to Sister Kelly, and so was unaware that he was the object of Driffid's attention. Even had he known, it was unlikely that he would have cared, so sure was he of himself. Driffid's hand strayed from the head of the spitting dragon, which formed one armrest of his chair, down to scratch between the ears of the wolf sitting on its haunches at his side. Through all the uncertainty and changes, Sitheth had remained resolutely faithful, unwavering in his devotion. It was a quality that Driffid would have liked to have seen in his fellow members of the Tuatha. It was true that, while some who he had considered allies now sided with Nuada, there were others who, unexpectedly, took his point of view, though probably for completely different reasons to his own. But of these there were not enough, not nearly enough. Sister Kelly, for example, was the prime mover behind many of the cults, the most important of which was, of course, the cult of Dagda. She counselled the Tuatha to remain and face the consequences of everything that had happened, and she despised Driffid for his weakness. Driffid realised that Sister Kelly was constantly comparing him to his esteemed predecessor, Dagda, but all the same, it was disheartening to have all that scorn poured upon him. Sister Kelly was nearing the end of her tirade now, and Driffid finally began to listen to her droning voice. "And so the first stage of this great plan of yours has failed. What do we do now? I have stated my opinion. If we delay too long and do not change our ways, then we shall surely be overrun, and it will be by Dagda's will." Nuada rose from his seat, twisting his heavy frame as he did so in order to face the sister. His head was covered by a thick mane of dark brown hair, and in the profile which this position afforded Driffid, his craggy broken nose was most prominent, replacing the livid scar across his forehead as his most notable feature. He grinned at Sister Kelly's sour face and offered a slight bow, at most an inclination of the head, in her direction. "Sister, much though we appreciate your, that is, Dagda's point of view, at present there is no danger. Only this morning I received word from Trelane of the Clear that the demons had not advanced beyond his furthest outposts, which means that it will probably be weeks before they approach Dinauban. They will ravage the Formoir and the Shay settlements before their hunger draws them here." Driffid interrupted him. "General, that is hardly an admirable attitude to take. The Formoir and the Shay were our friends, our allies for centuries. We should be sending help to them. Need I point out that their armies batter at our gates even now? That is not the action of a friend. We have blocked them from a chance of salvation that we have kept for ourselves alone. We have not behaved in a friendly fashion either," Driffid reminded him. Barras of Terion rose to his feet, his lip curled into a sneer. "They have never been our friends. When we first arrived, they fought us, and the battle lasted for a millennium. They are the traitor Grivni's servants. They do his bidding and seek, as they always have, to destroy us. In recent years, their plans have merely been more covert, but now they reveal their true colours." "Barras," Driffid said, shaking his head, "your long feud with the Firbolg over the farmlands in the mountains is well known. Do not let it cloud your judgment of this situation." "If I may continue," Nuada asked, "I was answering Sister Kelly's objections. There is no present danger, for we still have plentiful supplies of gold, and Emrys will quickly be able to accomplish his side of the operation. Before the demons can reach us, we'll be through the circle and have destroyed it." His eyes ran round the faces of the entire Tuatha. "The evacuation will proceed as planned, and it shall proceed exactly as the Tuatha itself agreed it should proceed." "Not a unanimous decision," Driffid murmured. "Certainly not the route I have advised, as you all know." "The majority agreed, and I am merely carrying out their wishes." "The majority are fools," said Kelly bitterly. "You all are. I refuse to associate myself with this ridiculous scheme. I shall return to the marches and await your destruction. Dagda shall protect me." She pushed her chair back from the table and rose. "Shall I provide an escort, Sister Kelly?" Nuada asked. "Just in case Dagda really has deserted us." "You utter fool," Kelly spat, and strode around the perimeter of the room to the double doors. As she reached out to open them, they were pulled open from without, and Carian entered. "Fifta," he greeted her. "I bring strangers to—" "What?" she asked harshly. "I said that I bring strangers—" She gave an exasperated exclamation and pushed past him. "Well, I—" began Carian. "What do you want, Carian?" asked Driffid wearily. His fingers idly ran round Sitheth's ears in a double loop, ruffling the hair slightly. "Ah, yes," Carian ushered Rhys, a young girl with a pack on her back, and a small, dark-eyed man into the room. "More people from the other world have come through—" "And that's not all, sir," Rhys broke in. "Immediately prior to the arrival of these two of General Nuada's guard passed through the circle." "Two passed through the circle? Why? Surely none of Nuada's men could have been witches." "Impossible!" bellowed Nuada angrily. "If not, Then I cannot explain the incident. Almost as soon as they had gone, these two arrived. "Will you please stop interrupting me?" squawked Carrion, his lisp momentarily overridden by his irritation. Driffid raised an eyebrow. "Have you anything to add, Carrion?" "Well, no, but I am the High Druid. I deserve a little respect, surely." "Get out of here, Carrion," Nuada cried. "You self-important little—" Carrion's eyes widened, and from his throat there began to issue forth strangulated gurglings. His face flushed a mottled purple and red. "You are dismissed, Carrion. Attend to your duties," Driffid told him. "Nice people, these, Professor," Ace commented. "Yes," the doctor agreed, and, taking her hand, he pushed aside Carrion and Rhys to address the Tuatha De Danann. "If I might interrupt your internal squabbles." He jumped lightly onto the table. "I'm the doctor, and," with a strength belied by his size, he pulled up Ace beside him, "this is my friend Ace." "Just what do you think you're doing?" Nuada shouted. The doctor's face crinkled into a broad smile. "Sit down, Ace," he said, directing her to Sister Kelly's vacant chair. She dropped from the table and arranged herself comfortably in the hard wooden seat. She swung her legs up and planted her trainers firmly on the tabletop. "Just trying to clarify a few things," the doctor answered Nuada's question. "For a start, what is this place, and why have we been brought here?" Driffid rose. "If you would remove yourself from our council table, then I might perhaps answer you." He gestured downwards with a wave of his arm. "Ah, well," the doctor sighed, "anything to make life easier." He sprang down to the flagged floor and then leant on the back of Ace's chair, cradling his chin on his crossed forearms. Driffid stepped forwards from his menagerie of a throne and spoke to the other members of the Tuatha. "I think I shall handle this matter alone, and so I officially end this meeting of the Tuatha De Danann." One by one, they filed out of the room until only Captain Rhys, General Nuada, Ace, and the doctor were left with him. "Nuada, I think I should be present. The security of the circle rests with me." "Nonsense, Nuada. You may go." General Nuada seemed to be about to say something, but finally he turned on his heel and left. The doors slammed shut behind him. Driffid's old eyes swivelled to rest on Captain Rhys. "Captain, would you wait here a few moments while I talk with our guests?" Rhys nodded curtly, and then Driffid turned to smile at the two travellers. "Doctor, Ace, if you would follow me." As Driffid led them through a door at the back of the chamber, Scytheth rose and padded softly behind Ace and the doctor. The room they entered was small and lit only by the embers of a dying fire. He motioned for them to sit in the cushion-padded high-backed chairs as he restocked the fire with split logs. Ace slipped free of her rucksack and balanced it against the wall before she sat down. She brushed her long hair over her shoulders as she watched the old man by the fire. His earthy-coloured robe swept the floor, dangerously close to the glowing ashes, as he moved wood onto the hearth. After a few jabs with the poker, the logs began to burn, and Driffid too lowered himself into one of the chairs. Scytheth settled down to bask in the warmth of the fire. As Ace looked down at the thick fur on the back of the wolf, she noticed for the first time how cold this whole place was. She shivered and dug herself into the deep padding of the chair. She looked at the old man's face. He seemed to be thinking, and it was some time before he spoke. Finally, when his soft rhythmic breathing had seemed to become one with the silence of the room, he began to speak. "No doubt you are confused and maybe even frightened by all that has happened to you," he said. Ace was about to interrupt to contradict him, but the doctor waved her into silence. "You have been carried from your home, your Earth, to this strange place called Dinorban in the land of Tir Na Nog. I can offer you few comforting thoughts at this time. I'm afraid that we cannot allow you to return, lest you should reveal our presence to the people of Earth. I'm told by Emrys and Nuada that you vastly outnumber us." The figure was one beyond an old mind's comprehension. "This country must seem a terrifying place, with its dark red skies and Aron's wheel in the ascendancy, but it was not always like this." His eyes were unfocused, drifting back in time to an age when the sun warmed the green rolling hills and the expansive oak woodlands, where man and beast lived in harmony, living in a good-natured symbiosis with the beautiful land. "What's Aron's wheel?" asked Ace. Driffid recalled his mind from his wanderings. It pained him to do so, for when he let his thoughts roam, he was almost back there with Wynne in their cottage on the outskirts of the Shea forest. Her death, late one night, had finally brought him to Dinorban to do his duty. Her death, lit by the foul light of Aron's wheel. Ah, a foolish name for the red sun, used by superstitious peasants and more educated people like myself when the fear and oppression get to be too much. They used to say that Aron and Dagda chased across the sky in fiery chariots, and once every 15 days Dagda would obliterate his ancient enemy, only for him to be reborn from Dagda's flesh. A look of confusion crossed his face. Where was I? "It wasn't always like this," prompted the doctor, again hushing Ace. "Indeed, it used to be so different. Such a wonderful place, full of joy and life and richness." A trickle of a tear inched its way down his cheek, catching the orange firelight until it mingled with the grey hairs of his beard. Every day he shed a tear for Wynne and her lost chances, their lost chances. He turned his head towards the fire to hide his expression, but Ace could hear the sadness in his voice. The doctor leaned forward in his chair to listen. "I worked so hard. When the sky was blue, worked for peace, worked for cooperation. I had to. That was all there was for me. And then one morning it was all destroyed. It had all been for nothing. With a single blow our lives were transformed to the mean, miserable, pointless existence that we lead now. All taken away as easily as you take a toy from an errant child. One morning the sun didn't rise, however much we prayed or wished or wept or hoped. It was as though we had fallen from grace. There was a man called Grivney. He was wise beyond worlds and had helped us through adversity before. In our foolishness, we thought that he would help us now. The Tuatha sent an emissary to Grivney. He did not return. There were those who claimed that the Formois, or the Furbolg, or the Shea, or even the Kessel had turned against us and had killed the messenger. I refused to believe it. But Nuada decided to take a small band of his guards to Grivney's island. When he got there, horror! A horde of demons swarmed from the sea. All of Nuada's men were massacred, brutally murdered. And during their dying agonies, Grivney danced and exhorted them to further atrocities from his battlements. Only Nuada survived. Why, Grivney? Why? Why? Driffid's tremulous words dissolved in a flood of tears that stripped the layers of grime from his face. But he recovered his composure quickly and continued. Before he changed, Grivney was a good man. He helped us, gave us things, guided us. But he changed so much. So much. He took away the sun, unleashed the plague of demons. Nuada says we must flee Tir na Nog and seek refuge amongst the seething masses of earth. Perhaps he is right? Is he? He looked beseechingly at Ace, who could only shrug her shoulders. He seemed not to have noticed, or perhaps he had, for he returned his gaze to the dancing flames. I believe it is a test set by the gods. I asked Carian what he thought about it, but I think that recent events have caused him to lose his faith. He doesn't seem to believe anything now, and it would be a rather rash action to begin a theological argument with Sister Kelly. I think we must destroy the circle, combat the demons, win back Tir na Nog, win back favour. But I must bow to the majority of the Tuatha De Danann." He paused, and the doctor asked, "But what of us? You say we can't return, and I understand your reasons. A long time ago, I removed 2 people from their home because I thought they might reveal my secrets and the secrets of my TARDIS. But 2 people in a world of many millions are very few. It would be a drop in the water, a piece of random information that most would ignore, even if we were to tell anyone. After all, there are only the 2 of us." "No," Driffid shook his head. "There have been many over the years, and at this stage we cannot allow anything to jeopardize our safety. You can see that, can't you?" He seemed to be asking for their approval of the sentence of exile. "You don't sound too sure of yourself," said Ace. Driffid looked at her sadly. "I'm not," he told her. "But if it were left to Nuada, you would be dead by now. He has strong beliefs, and I think he would not tolerate my presence as leader of the Tuatha if I tried to let you return. He would kill you, and then he would kill me. None from your world may go back, no matter what. But there is another chance." "Yes?" the doctor asked suspiciously. The word chance had an unpleasant ring of danger to it. "Gwyfni was once a good man. We'll give you food, horses, maps, and you may leave Dinorban. Go to find Gwyfni, try to talk to him, maybe even persuade him that his present course is evil." "It's not much of an option, Professor." "Yet it is really all there is for you. Nuada will put you out of Dinorban to prevent you entering the circle. At least with the choice I offer you, you will have some sort of purpose out there." "Ah, well, so long as we can get killed on purpose," Ace muttered. "I once spoke with Gwyfni. I spoke with him many times. He did things for us, helped us, was like a father to the land. He was nearly a god, you see. He cared for us, and yet he did not love us. And in the end, even that care has been abandoned. Maybe something in his life died." Driffid remembered finding Wynne, remembered nearly striking the Shay who had led him to her body. It hadn't been the Shay's fault, but in that moment Driffid had wanted someone to blame, to accuse. If he could react in such a way to his loss, how might a nearly god react? Ace looked to the doctor and saw a frail figure slumped in the chair. As though he felt her eyes upon him, he guiltily drew himself more erect. "There is something in my life," said the doctor. His voice was quiet. "Yes?" probed Driffid. The doctor paused, uncertain. He seemed to be searching for something. Ace wondered if it was something in his past, or maybe even something in his future. The sudden diminution of the etchings on his face revealed that the connection had been made. "We accept," he said firmly. "You what?" Ace exploded, pushing herself up out of her chair. "It's all right, Ace. Save a world and be back in time for tea. We accept. When do we start?" "Tomorrow. It is past noon, and the Formois will be growing active. Tonight you will eat well and rest." He rose to his feet. "I will ask Captain Reese to arrange some quarters for you, and perhaps he might even be prevailed on to show you around Dinorban." "Don't I get a say in this?" Ace whispered savagely to the doctor. "It's all right, Ace. I know what I'm doing." He tapped the side of his nose and winked at her. Realization dawned on Ace. "Oh, I get it, right." She mirrored his actions and gave him a quick dib in the ribs, eliciting a wince. Together they followed Driffid into the council room, where Captain Reese was still waiting patiently. Sitheth remained lying before the fire, acknowledging their departure merely by opening an eye for a second. "Captain, would you prepare accommodation for Ace and the doctor? Just for one night. And after that, you could take them around Dinorban." "Yes, sir." "And now I shall retire. Farewell, Doctor. Farewell, Ace. I shall not see you tomorrow, but may Dagda ride alongside you and the land mother support and nourish your footsteps." He disappeared to rejoin his wolf by the fire. "So, you've agreed to the same foolhardy mission, have you?" "So it would seem," the doctor answered. "Well, you'd better come along with me then. Dagda alone knows why I've got to nursemaid you. I'm a soldier. This should be Carrion's job. But the little reptile's never around when you need him. Not that that's very often." "You don't get on very well, do you?" said Ace. "What makes you think that? We were close friends when we were young. Still are, for that matter." "Isn't it always the way?" commented the doctor. "What's that? No, I don't suppose it is. Just because we've different opinions, different ways of behaving, different views of life, doesn't mean we can't like each other." "Congratulations, Captain. You could start a whole new philosophy talking like that." "Are we going, or what?" Ace butted in. "Ah, yes. Time and tide wait for no man. Lead on, Captain." Reese took them back down to the enormous feasting hall. By bellowing for several minutes, he managed to summon a servant, whom he dispatched with instructions for the preparation of rooms for the doctor and Ace. Once this was finished with, he turned back to them. "I don't know what you expect me to show you. You do have people, kitchens, bedrooms, corridors, staircases where you come from, I assume? This is true. I suppose I could take you up onto the ramparts, give you some idea of where you'll be going, show you what you'll be up against." "An excellent suggestion, Captain," the doctor agreed enthusiastically. "Why don't you do just that?" "Well, come on then." The captain led them through narrow corridors and winding passageways, which gradually inched upwards through the solid handiwork of long-dead stone masons. He explained that he was avoiding the main routes to reduce the number of people they would meet. As it was, they saw no one. Their course was interrupted briefly by two spiral staircases, one of which bore a wall exposed to crumbling, soggy soil. Water trickled in multiplicitous rivulets down the steps. The walls along the way were adorned at intervals with lush tapestries, which Ace realised fitted into a sort of pattern. They appeared to depict scenes from the lives of a variety of heroes, distinguishable only by the colour of their hair. At the lower levels, the hero was depicted as a young boy, weaponless and relying on his wits to gather the accoutrements of a warrior. As they rose, the tapestries moved on to the hero's wooings, and then to his adventures in a world populated by strange creatures. Fairies, centaurs, and unicorns, Ace would have said. She wondered for a moment how centaurs and unicorns had found their way into a world of ancient Celts, but quickly forgot the thought. Higher still, the hero began a voyage across turbulent seas, encountering many strange lands. The tapestries of each hero inevitably ended with a visit to an isle inhabited by a strange hooded figure atop a spindly tower, following which the hero's life ended, and he was carried away on a burning ship. These were the stuff of legends, Ace thought. But in Tir na Nog, the stuff of legends was probably what had actually happened. Finally, they emerged into the open air. The top of the wall was divided into two levels, the higher of which looked over the encamped masses of Dinorban and bore various weapons of war, most of which were unattended. A catapult stood alone amongst its ammunition, and next to that was what appeared to be a giant crossbow, its weapons hewn from whole tree trunks. This was the level that they had come out onto, and from it Captain Reese pointed out things in which he thought the Doctor and Ace might be interested. The lower level, you see, is where the archers and pike throwers are positioned, along with the tar burners and others skilled in more close-range combat. This level here is for the machines of war. The bolt throwers were designed by one of our less sane rulers, who developed a paranoia about the great flying beasts. They've never been used in war. He gave a worried look to the sky. To be honest, we're all rather unused to the concept of war of any kind. For so many centuries we have lived in truce with the Formois, the Firbolg and the Shay, and even before then the Kethel rarely made much contact with us, except when there was any great need, a self-seeking group if ever there was one. What's he talking about, Professor? Captain, these names you use, they're unfamiliar to us. Perhaps you could give us some better idea about these people. Not people. Their armies are arrayed against Dinorban. Look out there. They seek to destroy us because we seek to return to our true home. We cannot let them through the gateway. How long would we last if we are accompanied by those beasts? But Drifford told us that Tir Na Nog is being attacked by demons. You'd leave all these others to be destroyed by them? Ace was disgusted that Rhys could think this perfectly natural. The captain sneered. They are kith and kin with the demons. Givni created them all and seeks by any means to destroy us. But you've lived in peace for so long. Why should they turn on you now? Who can fathom the way of monsters? Down there, look. He pointed to one of the grey masses which Ace now interpreted as being one of the attacking armies. Down there are Firbolg, semi-human. They have the head, arms and trunk of a true man. But below that they are horses. The army that faces the gate directly is the mass of the Shay. They are human-like in form, but their bodies are covered with a red hair and their heads are like the head of a wolf. And over there to the north is the army of the Formois. They are men of stone, grey-skinned and with the strength of the earth and the sap of the mountains for their blood. They rest when the sun is at its zenith, even this hellish excuse for a sun, and that is the time when you'll be able to leave Dinorban, for when the Formois rest, the other armies ease their attack, if you can call it that. And what of the Kethel? Asked the doctor, realising that Rhys had missed them from his description. The Kethel are not amongst the armies below. They still roam the plains, doubtless to waylay men on their way back to Dinorban. They take the form of an ordinary horse, but can be distinguished by the horn which pierces their forehead. That's not Kethel, dum-dum, said Ace. That's a unicorn. Rhys gave her a strange look. Aye, that is what Hearn called them. But there are many names which amount to the same thing. A rose by any other name, commented the doctor. What's that? Asked Rhys. Shakespeare, the doctor told him, but the captain's face remained blank. English literature would naturally be a mystery to him. Rhys turned and pointed out across the land. You'll travel to the north, through the forests of Curd, and then across the plains of Porfa. Beyond that lies the sea and the island of Gurivni. Come, it is time we ate. I have some food prepared in my rooms. Once again he led them through the labyrinthine corridors of the wall, as regular as a worm's wigglings through the underworld. His quarters were not far, though, and soon they were seated around a sparsely laden table. Venison, bread and wine are all I can offer, I'm afraid. Essential supplies are being distributed at a minimal level. That's all right, we understand, the doctor answered. He took a strip of the meat and tore a chunk off the loaf, and motioned for Ace to do the same. Rhys poured wine into wooden goblets and passed them to his guests. Ace took a sip and nearly gagged at the bitterness. What's that? I think it's meant more for softening the bread than for drinking by itself, the doctor told her. After a few mouthfuls you hardly notice the taste, Rhys added. Why? Ace coughed. Does it burn away your taste buds? Stop complaining, Ace. You've been far too spoiled in your choice of food. Maybe I should put you onto a more restricted diet. Ha! Ace took a piece of the meat and bit into it. It's a bit salty, isn't it? Ace, said the doctor warningly. Wasn't complaining, just commenting. It is put into salt to preserve it. That'd explain it. They finished the meal in silence, except for Ace's winces at the searing taste of the wine. When they had all stopped eating, Rhys stirred and said, Now I shall show you to your quarters for the night. Follow me. The doctor's room was on the same level as Rhys's, and had a small window which commanded a wonderful view of Dinorban in all its squalor. A small log fire burnt in one corner, and the bed was heaped high with blankets dyed with every possible shade of browny red. The room was devoid of all ornament. We usually accommodate one of the chiefs here, but as you are an honoured guest from the other world, you may use it.
There's only one bed, said Ace. One of us will have to sleep on the floor.
You are not staying here, Reese said. We have a room for you down in the ladies' quarters.
What? I'm not leaving the Professor.
It'll be all right, Ace. Run along. Reese was already going out through the door, and so didn't see the exaggerated wink that the doctor gave to Ace. She gave him a quick thumbs up and turned to follow Reese.
Right. I'll catch you later, Professor.
Sleep well, Ace. The room, which was finally revealed as being hers, was tiny compared with the doctor's, and had a single guttering candle as illumination. There was no window onto the outside world. The only consolation was that it was warm, apparently because the main chimney from the kitchens ran nearby. The candles smelt strongly of candle smoke. You'll be woken in the morning and taken to the doctor's room, where you will wait for me.
Right-o, Gov.
Ace nodded. It would be inadvisable to leave your room. It is easy to get lost in the corridors.
I shan't move from this spot, Ace told him.
He looked narrowly at her, and then turned and left, slamming the door shut behind him. Ace threw herself onto her bed and let out a grunt of pain. She shifted the blankets to one side and found that there was almost no padding. Ah well, she thought, it may be uncomfortable, but it does your back the world of good. She lay back on the bed, and as she grew accustomed to the sound of her own breathing, the more distant sounds beyond the wall began to seem clearer to her. Somewhere nearby, girlish voices were raised in chatter. Further away, the sound of metal striking metal was repeated again and again, and in amongst those noises there was a low general murmur of speech, as though the walls of Dinorban were whispering quietly to themselves. When at last the sound had fallen to a minimum, Ace eased herself up from her bed and stretched. She opened the door softly and looked up and down the passageway. Nobody was around, and so, closing the door behind her, she set off into the maze. She had paid close attention to the route by which Reese had brought her down from the doctor's room, and knew exactly where she was going. This tapestry here, a door there, a particular twist in the corridor were all the directions she needed. The journey took 20 minutes, only because she had to tread cautiously. At one point, she ducked into a darkened doorway as a couple of soldiers walked past. As she hid there, she heard the loud rumbling of a sleeper undisturbed by troubling dreams. Finally, she arrived at the doctor's door. She pushed it open and looked in. The bed was empty, and the fire was burning low. She looked around puzzled, until a voice heralded her.
Ace, what are you doing here?
The doctor sat eased into the slit in the wall, which took the place of a window. He seemed to have been looking out. She wondered how long he had sat there.
What's the plan, Doctor? How are we going to get back through the circle, back to Earth?
Whatever gave you the idea that I planned to do that, Ace?
Well, all this...
She mimicked his winking and tapping of his nose.
Nervous twitch, Ace. But surely we're not going to go out there when there's all these demons around.
I think we ought to, Ace. There's something peculiar about all of this. A Celtic culture on another world with a highly technological matter transmission device disguised as a stone circle? Unicorns and centaurs. And then this business of a sun vanishing. I fully intend to investigate.
But they're savages,
Ace protested, thinking back to the burnings she had seen. I've seen worse atrocities committed on Earth. This is a world in turmoil. Something needs to be done for it. Now, go back to your room, get some sleep, and we'll discuss it in the morning.
But Professor...
Night, Ace. He dismissed her. Ace turned, slammed the door shut, and stalked off down the corridor. She hardly noticed that she wasn't paying attention to where she was going, and when she finally came out of her annoyance with the doctor, she was lost. She stamped her foot in anger and wondered which way she had come. She could trace her footsteps back a few meters, but then there was an intersection, and try as she might, she couldn't be certain which branch she had come down. She felt fairly sure, however, that she hadn't descended any stairwells, and so she hoped that she would be able to wander around this level until she found the doctor's door again. With this purpose in mind, she set off along one of the passages. But the more and more she wandered around hoping to recognize some landmark, the more and more frustrated she became. It seemed as though she had been up this particular passage, for instance, at least 3 times. This place was nearly as bad as the TARDIS, except that she knew intuitively that it couldn't be as big as the Doctor's time machine. As she proceeded along another identical corridor, she suddenly heard footsteps coming towards her. Her first reaction was to leap into hiding, but then she decided that it would be better merely to ask for some directions. With this in mind, she poked her head out of her concealment, but something about the figure approaching her made her quickly withdraw. She recognized him from the council room, but she couldn't remember his name. He had a thick mass of brown hair and a rocky outcrop of a nose. There was something wild about the eyes that frightened Ace. When he was past her, she peeked out into the corridor. He was clad in a chainmail vest and solid wooden sandals held onto his feet by long leather thongs that wound round his legs up to his knees. Ace decided that someone who knew the layout of this place wasn't likely to go up and down the same passage as she had been doing, and so she followed him, staying just out of sight, but within hearing distance of the clop his sandals made against the stone flags. In the end, this strategy made her lose him, and still without finding the doctor's room. She cursed quietly to herself, but seeing no point in standing around, she continued searching. It came as quite a surprise when she almost fell over the man she had been following. She ducked back into the shadows and watched him. He was standing at a window, gazing through the hole in the wall at who knows what. His lips were moving softly without any speech coming out, and his hands clutched the sides of the window tightly. Ace stood and watched him for some time, hardly daring to move lest she reveal her presence, and eventually he sagged and fell back from the window. He stood, half-crouched, for 6 shuddering breaths, and then straightened himself up. He turned to face the corridor and, as he swung about, his eyes for one brief moment seemed to be looking directly at Ace, and she saw fires burning there. She gasped in horror, but he did not seem to have noticed her, for he walked away without a backwards glance. Ace came out of hiding and went to the window. She couldn't recognize the view, but something about the outline of the distant horizon, dark black against the not quite black of the sky, told her that she was not looking down on the encamped humans. From this, she knew that the doctor's room was on the other side of the wall, and she set off again with renewed confidence. 2 minutes later, she found the door and the path back to her own room. Back inside, she blew out the candle, and with only the flickering light of the torch in the corridor outside to hinder her, drifted into a heavy sleep, haunted by a man with red eyes who rode a centaur into battle against men of stone.